Can you hear me, Jessica?
Hello.
Hi, I was about to text you, Dr. Bajor, just to say I hope you weren't waiting. Sheila was getting it going.
Oh, no problem.
Oh,
Here. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. Just, excited, looking forward to tonight. Working on the writing, so that's coming together.
Great. Okay. I know you people have to really take advantage of the summer months because that's when you can get a lot of things done.
Oh, definitely. I'm at about 30 pages with the new participant that I'm working on. So
Oh, wow.
I hope to have that to you hopefully soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
hi, I made you a co-host, so you have control, Dr. Bajor and Dr. J.
Oh, thank you, Sheila.
Sheila, is there going to be a document to sign in like the previous times? Like an attendance form? Not sure if you're on mute, but I'll put it in the chat box. No worries.
I'm sorry, I'm uploading it now and I'm putting it in the chat box.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, test it out, Jessica, please. I made it for 2 hours, Dr. Bajor and Dr. J.
Thank you.
And Sheila, I can confirm that it works great. I just submitted my own, so you should get that on your end.
I have it. I see it. Thank you.
Thanks.
This is so exciting. It's really nice that that you guys are doing this for everyone. I think it's an invaluable way to learn. It's a nice intimate setting, and with great topics. So thank you for that.
Thank you for volunteering to teach us on your summer time that you have. I appreciate you and Dr. J because we are at the stage of learning what software to use, if we use software, when coding and different things like that. So I'm sure anything you share with us today would be appreciated.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, we're enthusiastically welcoming Dr. Bajor and Dr. Rumenapp, and thank you all. We really appreciate it because, again, I feel like we learn so much from your collective expertise. So thank you for that.
Oh, pleasure. I love my students.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I'm excited that Dr. Bajor is joining me. So I'm going to try to play a little bit more of a back role today and let her take the way. But,
I don't want to take over and do the lecture thing. Everybody who knows me knows I can be very long-winded, so I don't want to do that to everybody.
We won't join into a competition about that because might give you a run. I've noticed that people on your side of the country are a little bit more brief than those of us in the Midwest. It takes us about twice as long to say things. So if you really want to go into a competition, it might get you a little.
Don't worry, Joe. It's here too. My husbands have no patience for my husband when he tries to explain things to them. He takes about 3 paragraphs too long, and they want him to cut it down to like five words. So yes, what we need is Dr. Stewart here to like just snip it all off right there.
Yeah, I'm a little bit better when I'm looking at other people's stuff, but I'm working on this AERA proposal, which those of you who are interested, that's coming up in like what, 5 days? 5 days AERA is due, and they have a 2,000 word limit, which would be totally doable. But for some reason, I still just can't get things to fit in 2,000 words. That's what I've been trying to do all day is get through it. Unfortunately, my findings section is all that's left, and that's going to be the longest part. So got to start cutting first.
Did you get my email, Dr. J, regarding the manual thing?
I did. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. I got from you and Jessica and a couple of other students. Dr. Bajor has offered possibly to take a look at it, but we will be rolling out a new handbook for our kind of first and second year students. So hopefully it'll answer all the questions that you had wished had been answered. It kind of serves as like an FAQ of every question that was asked to me in the past year or so. So I do appreciate your feedback on that.
It's a great idea.
And Jessica or Sheila, you could just let us know when you want us to go ahead and start. I don't mind waiting a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think that'd be great if we want to wait another, 3 or 4 minutes to let folks kind of settle in, and then we can get moving.
Ned, who's coming to class today?
I know. I see a little guy, a little adorable student here to learn more about QDAS.
Internet. Okay.
Joe, did I hear that you're coming to New York?
Yeah, I'll be there. And I guess I'm flying in. I'll be there the 15th through the 18th or something like that. I'll be around.
Very cool. Into Manhattan or surrounding areas? You don't know.
I haven't made plans. I'm going to try to go down to campus so I was actually going to try to make it in for they didn't give us the exact dates. So Unfortunately, that my trip did not hit the date that they're doing the School of Ed graduation from this year. So previous year, I guess. But are you walking in it?
Well, I was, but it was going to require me driving down the night before from Atlantic City and then driving right back down to Atlantic City right after. But the big thing was the COVID test, which I would have to go find the COVID test in Atlantic City. And then I'd have to get my mother tested as well and my son tested. So, and then, the masks, getting my 90-year-old mother to wear a mask would be, so that on top of everything, I had the plan to do it. I have the gown and everything, but it's all right. Small thing.
Yeah, I was kind of bummed that I missed it, but I'm supposed to be I'm going to Seattle, I think tomorrow night, and then from Seattle going back over to New York, and then so I'll spend a day with my family over in Merrick, and then the rest of the
Merrick, Long Island. Yeah, I grew up in New Hyde Park.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's where I'm going to. I don't know if I'll stay at my aunt's house. I'm still trying to text to see if she has room, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time visiting a friend in Brooklyn, and then some time at the campus, and have a few other people I want to see. So if anybody's around, let me know.
Well, if you're near Bay Ridge, I'd have to get back. If I get back from, we can actually have everybody congregate in Southern Brooklyn somewhere over that weekend. If you give a shout out.
Yeah, shout out. That sounds good. Queens sound good. Oh, America's right by me. I'm in Elmont, and Jessica is in Queens. We could definitely do the Queens thing.
As long as my daughter puts me out of my misery and lets me get home before Sunday. Dance competitions are not known to be short, but if I can get back in time, I'd happily meet you guys. A lot of fun. And where in Brooklyn is your friend, Joe?
To me,
you don't know. Come on, Joe.
Actually, so she just moved there. She moved there 2 months before the pandemic, and so she's for her, Brooklyn consists of her apartment, and she hasn't been able to get out and see anything.
Yeah, I'm betting she's near Park Slope or Cobble Hill or someplace close to the city, which would be nice. Then you can walk over the bridge to Manhattan. There's a lot of nice stuff there, but if you find out where you're going, I'll tell you where to hit. There's a lot of breweries, a lot of fun stuff.
That's what I'm in it for.
Right?
See, I like how she said brewery. I was going to say tea houses, but we know what's really the teacup. So,
well, I guess I shouldn't, assume. I guess.
No, you're spot on. I'm just saying. I'm just kind of making save face by saying tea, but
I just assume because I'm married to an Irishman. It's all about the beer.
Yeah, my husband's Irish too, redheaded and Irish.
There you go. Oh,
very redheaded. But I'm just taking a peek at the time. It's probably a good time to kind of jump in and get going. And thank you all for being here. Adele, thank you for, kind of getting us going with the dialogue and talking about potentially getting together. I'm in Queens too, so. But if Dr. Rumenapp and Dr. Bajor, if you all want to go ahead and get started, we welcome both of you today, and we're so thankful, very grateful, just that you're here and that you're able to share everything that you know about this very interesting and scintillating topic. So we'll hand the floor over to you.
So for those of you who haven't met Dr. Bajor, she is joining us tonight. She teaches the qualitative methods courses for the PhD in literacy program. So she's going to kind of kick it off, and I will jump in and we'll kind of dialogue back and forth. Of course, tonight we really want you to be engaged, stop and ask questions. The main goal for tonight is really going to be discussing kind of in a sense, the pros and cons of using qualitative data analysis software. So what can it do for you? What can't it do for you? What is possible with technology and what is just magic that's not going to happen, right? And takes you doing the work. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. Next week, for those of you who plan to join us, again, we'll do a little bit more workshop style, walking through Nvivo. Most of the platforms do the same thing, but Nvivo has a pretty liberal free trial, 2 weeks, and you get all of the tools within it, so you can kind of explore to see if it works. Some of the other ones, you don't get as much access in those 2 weeks. So we have a two-part series. Today we're going to talk just about kind of qualitative data analysis in general. What can the software do for you? I will, towards the end, give a brief. Yeah, thank you, Adele. Adele posted that. It's about $99 for students per year. It's actually a good price for that. Faculty is a lot more. So anyway, at the end, I will show you where you can download it and how you can start to upload a little bit of data so that it will maximize our time next week. But until then, Dr. Bajor, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rumenapp, and it's so nice to see everybody. I haven't met a lot of you, but I welcome you to the program, and I really am so happy to see my former students. So hello to all of you, and I miss you guys, and it's really nice to see you. Thank you for having me here today. So what I did not do was I didn't take notice of that last PowerPoint, the revised one. So I am working for my old one. So then Dr. Rumenapp, when it's time for you to transition over to what you would like to share, we'll have to kind of switch it out. Sorry about that. So I'm going to share. Can everyone see this PowerPoint? So my goal today, I didn't want to make this into a lecture, and I don't want to bore you guys. I just wanted to go over a quick overview of what QDAS means and what it can do and what it can't do, and also some little out branches of qualitative data itself, because we did in the course that I taught, we did explore qualitative data analysis, but we didn't take the different routes that it can actually follow. And it can follow so many different paths. I just wanted to go through some of them with you today, very, very, very briefly. So, and please, I invite you all to jump in with questions or comments whenever you like. This is not a lecture. I didn't want to make it like a lecture. I just wanted to share some information with you. So for those of you who are new to QDAS, QDAS is the qualitative data analysis software. And there are certain things that QDAS can do, and there are certain things that QDAS cannot do. One thing that I have to share from the very beginning is that QDAS is not meant to code the data for you. You are the researcher. You are the handler of the information that you collect. So I just wanted to make that very, very clear. It's really up to you to take hold of the data that you collect and to code that in the most responsible and effective way based on the research questions that you formulated for your research study. So that's one thing that it cannot do. However, it can organize, it can graph, and it's a wonderful workspace. So for organization, from the very, very beginning of your research study, you want to organize all of your data. It can run away with you if you do not do so. So from the very first second that you start collecting data, you want to keep everything in a folder. And you want to make sure that everything is organized, whether you're going to organize it according to date, according to participant, or both. You just have to find a way that works for you to organize your data from the very outset of your research study. Another thing that it can do is it can graph for you. So I do remember, now I'm not going to talk extensively about Nvivo or Deduce. I've worked with them both, but it hasn't been a long time since I've been involved with either software. So I don't want to give you any information that might be misleading, because I know that there probably have been enormous, amazing developments in the past 2 years. But one thing that I did rely on with QDAS is the graphing. And that's because Nvivo, for example, has all of your data embedded in it. So what it can do is it can, when you feed the data into it, it can spit out these amazing graphs that are wonderful visuals for you to add into your dissertation or your research study, whatever you're up to. And it's also a great workspace. So you can take memos in there, and you can, keep track of your coding. It's someplace that you can rely on so that everything is in one area, one, I guess, pocket or one folder, so you can always refer to everything that you need for your research study. And that's so important because it's going to save you a lot of headache if you don't have to search around for it. So some basic information about Nvivo that I do remember is that you really should try to access it or purchase it or whatever before you need to use it. And I say this because I think it's very, very important for you to become familiar with the terminology, with the way it works, experiment with it a few times, on some just informal ways with some of your data. Just make sure that you know how to maneuver around different software systems, because if you don't, you're going to find yourself very frustrated. So one thing that I did notice is that for the Nvivo, it's really important for you to understand how the views work. And the view, as I remember, is the list view, the navigation view, and the detailed view. And the reason this is so important is because it's going to help you run everything more systematically. It's going to help you improve the way you input your data and look at your data and code your data. So it's really something that you have to look at before you want to actually use the software. Another thing is files. As I said before, it's really, really important for everyone to keep everything in folders, I guess, before, at the very outset of your research study. And this way, if you have all your information in folders already, it's going to be a lot easier for you to input or to upload all this information into Nvivo or any software system that you use, because everything's going to be right there at your fingertips. You're not going to have to go searching around for things and then, possibly overlook some of the data that you've collected. Everything will be in one folder already for you, and it'll be easier for you to upload. Also, codes and nodes. Now, I know in Nvivo, codes used to be called nodes, and I don't know if that's changed. I think it has, but the reason I'm mentioning this is because certain software programs have specific terms that you may not be familiar with. So again, it's really important for you to access the software and get used to it before you really need to use it. And then memos. In my course, I'm always telling you to take memos and have a researcher journal and have post-its, and that's amazing. That's wonderful. However, if you're someone who can lose things or is not really great about writing things down, then you can just put memos straight into Nvivo. They have a way for you to do that, and then you can also code that information there too. So it's like doing everything in one space, and it's keeping it safe also. And then lastly, there's transcription. And for transcription, it's important to remember that if you're going to use Nvivo or Deduce or whatever system for transcription, it's not perfect. And you have to really understand that if you're going to rely on systems, software, apps, transcribing your data, you really have to do a really careful job of combing through it and looking for mistakes, errors, things that you can pick up yourself that wouldn't be picked up in the transcription. So that's just something that I want to mention, because I did mention that in my course. I've mentioned it all the time, but I think it's just so important that it needs to be mentioned again. So it's something to remember. I'm going to go over 3 ways of analyzing data, and only because I think they're probably the most common ways. They're not the only ways, so please don't get that idea. However, it's just a little bit more detailed than I provided in my qualitative course, because we didn't have time for everything. I apologize for that, and there's so much to share in qualitative research, but it's unending. but just some little snippets about data analysis. So I think the most common way to analyze your data is thematically. So that's when you're coding your data and you're using your research questions and you're looking for words or phrases or even paragraphs that pop out at you that address the research question that you're asking, or the questions that you're asking. And this is important because those little tidbits are going to be eventually put together and they're going to become themes. So initially, when you're first looking at your data, you're coding your data. Eventually, when you're looking at your data even more deeply and you're going through it again and again, those codes are going to become themes. You're going to see themes emerging. And that's thematic. And thematic analysis is all about the content. It looks exclusively at the content. What is in the data? So that's something to remember. And I just, I included here on the bottom a really nice video. And I think it does a great job of explicitly walking you through the process of taking codes and developing them into themes in Microsoft Word. So this is just one alternative. If you don't want to go the route of QDAS, and if you don't really want to do everything by hand, this is just something else that you can do. You can use Microsoft Word. And it actually does, this video does a great job, or the researcher in the video does a great job of walking you through that whole process. So another way to analyze it is discourse analysis, and this is an outgrowth of linguistics. And whereas content analysis looks at the what, discourse analysis looks at the what and the how. So it gets a little bit more complicated. You're looking at the context behind what's being said. And I have an example here with person A and person B. Person A says, I'd like to buy this apple pie. Person B says, that'll be $6, please. So then the question is, who is person B likely to be? Anyone? Okay, it's a bakery worker. And now I'm telling you this because it's not something that's explicitly stated, but you can figure it out because of the words, because of the context that it's being said in. So, and then I have this video here that walks nicely through discourse analysis. So I'm trying to be very brief, I'm sorry. And let me just move this over. And then lastly, in our qualitative course, we talked a lot about different ways of collecting data. And we didn't really go into detail about how to analyze visual images. So one text that I would highly recommend to everyone is the new Saldana and Amasta text. And I have the references in the back of this PowerPoint. And it's actually, I think it's a 2022 version. So it's very, very good in going into detail about newer ways of analyzing data, more current ways, the most current ways. And so Saldana and Amasta, they talk about how they read this text, this weight loss text, and they saw these pictures were throughout the text, and they had pictures exactly like the one that I have here. Well, not exactly, but in the same vein. And they brought up the fact that this is, when you look at this picture, what are you thinking of? What comes to your mind? And it's something that if you saw an average person exercising, they probably wouldn't look like this. So they're talking about how using pictures, in addition to the other data sources that you collect, in other words, triangulating all the data, can be a very, very rich way of discovering things, the bigger picture of things. So, and they go into wonderful detail about that. I also want to mention that images or pictures, drawings, can be used and analyzed. And our course, we talked about Anderson and Spencer and how the participants were asked by the researchers to draw an image of what they felt AIDS was. And through them, the participants drawing these pictures, the researchers found through analysis that the drawings allowed the participants to express themselves in a more effective way to their caretakers. And this is something that, you know, we really need to start looking at. There are other ways of analyzing data, and they haven't always been done. There are newer ways of analyzing data, and I think it's so important that we don't overlook different ways and different data sources that we can collect and analyze, because there's so much out there. And you know, our participants have so much important information to share with us that we don't want to miss out on anything. So using everything that you possibly can and analyzing it, whether it's through QDAS or whether it's through, you know, by hand or through Microsoft Word, it's something that it's critical. So just, you know, if you have any questions, then you can ask. Now, next slide, I just wanted to show you that I do have a lot of different videos and articles that you may want to refer to about, you know, what I just mentioned in the PowerPoint. So I'm going to stop sharing because I don't want to talk too long. I promised myself like 10 minutes, but it's probably went beyond 10 minutes.
Can we get this slide with all those links with your videos?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think Sheila and Jessica have the version, and they will definitely share it.
Thank you.
They will share it with everyone.
Please sign the attendance sheet so we could get everyone's email.
And also, you know, I'm sorry. Does anyone?
Oh, no, I was just. I put the links in for everybody. Sorry, Dr. Bajor.
Oh, that's
that box. Yeah, I'll be quiet now. You go ahead.
No, I just, you know, I didn't want to monopolize the whole workshop, and that's why I wanted to try to really keep this brief. But if anybody has any questions about anything or about data analysis in general, then I'd love to hear them or try to answer them in the best way possible.
Actually, Dr. Bajor, I just wanted to, if I could just give my experience, since you were my advisor. I used Nvivo for my dissertation, and I loved it. It's not meant to replace your analysis, but it facilitates it so well. It allows that constant comparative coding. You keep going over and you keep refining your themes. And then you find you have sub themes, and you're constantly able to shift things around without that big mess of paper. So you have your umbrella nodes, they call them nodes, and then you have your sub nodes. So you might have something related to, say, attention, and then there's focus, and you find that these things start relating, and it helps you move things around in such an organized way. I can't live without it. And then I stopped being a student, and now they want to charge me $900 for it. So,
of course. So thank you, Adele, for mentioning that. That's so important. You know, the thing is, it's really hard work to do something manually. And, you know, I did it manually just because I like it like that. But it's also hard work to use QDAS because it's constantly looking through your data. Not once or twice, but so many times that it becomes tiresome. But having something, a workspace, like you're describing, some place to, you know, to work and to think about your data and to think about how you can elaborate on it or make comments or memos, how you can make the analysis easier is so important. It's going to make your life happier, because you're not going to have to toil so hard over you know, the data analysis, the data collection process. It's going to be right there for you.
Yeah,
so
and to go back into it, if say you found a word, it says, well, this word, I wonder how many times this word happens in my data sets, and it will word frequency for every one. Say, I don't know, boring, the word boring. and it literally will look through everything, and you'll say, wow, I missed a code, you know, something related to boredom, and then I could go back. So it helped you to double check and triple check and quadruple check your work. And yeah, it becomes huge, but still, I can't imagine doing it by hand. It just, I'm not that savvy, you know, I'm not that neat. So
Well, of course, by hand, I think it would be a little bit different also because you wouldn't probably pick up how many times a certain word was used.
yeah,
And it would be a little different, you know, but it depends on how well you work and your choice, your preference, how you best work.
Then you must see this. Top medical doctor shows a.
May I ask a question? I use Nvivo, and then when I want to change the name of the films, how can I do that? For example, when I code my data at the first time, I put some data, some films such as English learning, but when I look it again and again, I want to change it into another name. How can I do?
That's a great question, Shirley. Dr. Rumenapp or Dr. Doyle, do you know how to answer that? Because I haven't used Nvivo in quite some time.
so yeah, so when you see the list of codes and the subnodes, if you literally click on that code, you can change. It's like kind of like in Word doc that you hold the click. I don't know how many times exactly, a double click or whatever, how many clicks. You can actually change it that way, but you have to see your whole list when it has all the codes. I know the new version that's out doesn't show it the same way, and I'm actually working with the new version now, so I'm trying to find out where that is exactly. But in the old version, it used to be you would have your list of codes, you would see your subnodes, and you could literally cut and paste that into your manuscript because it was so neat. But you can change the codes by clicking on the actual name.
I'm using Nvivo 12, and then sometimes I want to change the name of some films because when I go back and forth, and then I think, oh, maybe I change it, it will be better. But I don't know how to do that. Another question is that I code the data from different parts. For example, when I get my data about culturally responsive learning, I code this part, and then I code another part, teacher self-efficacy, and then how can I mix them together?
Yeah, in a little bit, I'll open up Nvivo and we can play around with a little bit of this because I don't know that everybody here yet is familiar with what that platform looks like. So I'll open up Nvivo 12. Actually, I have it open on my computer, and we can maybe play around with some of those questions in a few minutes here once it's open so that we can look at it together. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of ways to kind of rename things. The great thing about Nvivo is that you and any other qualitative analysis software is that a lot of this is drag and drop. It's very intuitive. It's meant to feel kind of like other programs that you use. So changing the names, reorganizing things is actually a feature that that qualitative analysis software helps you do pretty well. Where if you're doing it by hand and you highlight everything orange, it's hard to go back and unhighlight everything orange and highlight it all blue, right? Like there's benefits and pros and cons to those, but we can definitely look at Nvivo in a few minutes too.
I feel so struggling, you know, because when I'm using Nvivo, I don't think I can use it well. So I print out all the transcript and I try to highlight something. But I think that, when I highlight something, I think, the software will do this part better than my manual, you know, and then I feel more and more confused and struggling. I want to combine different cases, different parts in Nvivo together, and I want to integrate my own feeling, my memos into Nvivo too. But I have so many technical problems, I think now.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and I want to address some of these questions that you brought up because I think they're really important for people to make a decision before they before you invest in something like Nvivo, because it's money and time. You have to learn how to use it well. But so I'll address some of those questions in a second. Invi, did you want to? I see your hand is up.
Yeah. Hi everyone, and thank you, Dr. Bajor and Rumenapp, for your time. I'm just wondering if we are concurrently looking at Nvivo and the QDAS, or is one overriding the other? I'm kind of confused. I have rudimentary knowledge of Nvivo. I had some training like almost 8 years ago. Never used it again, so I have to refresh my mind to be able to, just like Dr. Bajor is saying, if you don't use it, you know, it becomes kind of dormant. So can you please just clarify whether we are concurrently looking at both, or we are seeing that how QDAS outdoes Nvivo or whatever? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. I might have wanted to clarify a little bit before. So QDAS actually has a couple of different, like it'll mean slightly different things. So in the most basic sense, it just stands for Qualitative Data Analysis Software, of which Nvivo is one of the programs. So QDAS is like the overarching thing, and then there's a bunch of tools, one of which is Nvivo, another is Max QDAS. So it gets confusing because like they actually use QDAS in the name of some of the programs, but in short, we're talking broadly, and then using Nvivo just as an example of probably one of the more popular tools. But pretty much everything that we would talk about with Nvivo is going to hold true for all of the other software programs that you could use as well. And I'm actually going to show you a chart. Several people have kind of compared and contrasted some of the different programs to help you make an informed decision of what you would prefer to use. I don't have any stock in QSR International. I do not necessarily think Nvivo is the best thing in the world. I did use it, and that's why I'm comfortable talking about it, whereas some of the other programs, the QDAS programs, I'm not necessarily as familiar with, but they all roughly work the same. Another very popular one is Atlas TI. That's going to be one that very seasoned researchers use. So if you work with a large research consortium, chances are they won't use Nvivo, they'll use Atlas TI instead. And you'll start to see the type of people that use each program. In our field, in literacy, we tend to see Nvivo much more commonly, but it's not like that, you know, across the board. But good question. Did you, Dr. Bajor, did you want to jump in? And
yeah, I just want to add that it might be a good idea to look into each of them before you make a decision and see what you feel most comfortable with. But at the same time, that might not work for you just because you really need some time, as I was explaining, to get accustomed to these different software systems. So, but if you're interested in maybe two of them, that might be something that you might want to do. I know they have the trials, right, Dr. Rumenapp? They have trials that you can just kind of play with, or even look at videos and see which one appeals to you most.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so like one of the reasons I like Nvivo is because it does have that two-week free trial, as many of them do. All right, thanks, Jessica. So in other words, that's the nudge. Sure, I'm going to jump in here and talk about some of the kind of comparisons and a little bit more about what QDAS is, the QDAS is, QDAS-I don't know, however you would make it plural, what they can allow for you to do. So when I used to teach qualitative methods at my former university, I would teach it through using Nvivo, in part because the way that Nvivo works and the way that most of these softwares work, it's really good for understanding some of the basic concepts of qualitative research that is mostly about how do we break down our data and how do we build it back up, right? And that's largely what Dr. Bajor mentioned with how do you organize it. You have to do this analysis and qualitative research that's both on the front end of how do I first break this down and organize it into meaningful units. And then you also have to go back through and do the analysis and organization on the back end of how do I write this up in a way that makes sense. So there's always going to be analysis on both sides. And one of the places, or one of the things that I really like about using software for this task is that it helps me to keep organized. It helps me to break things down fairly easily because it's digital. I can pull up all of those units. And then I can piece those things back together when I'm building it back up. And that's where you will see different functions and features in the software itself that allows you to do that differently. As Dr. Bajor mentioned, a lot of this works with graphics and visualizations, right? That helps you to piece those things back together. There are clearly going to be people who prefer to work by hand. We know that. And actually, if I'm working on a small project, 5, 10 interviews, a couple focus groups, most of the time I'm going to work by hand. It just, to me, sometimes is not worth it to get a project up and running in the qualitative data analysis software. It's not necessarily beneficial for me to do all the coding and put it in there because it's a very organized, highly organized process once you get into the software. Sometimes it's easier to just do this by hand. Now, when you do things by hand, you have a very different relationship with your data than you do when you're looking at the screen. And this is something that you have to take into consideration. Qualitative data analysis is extremely intuitive. You feel it, you get a sense of it, you kind of go with how you're feeling. That does not mean that it's not systematic. It is extremely systematic in how we go about it. However, how you feel about your data matters. And this is why Dr. Bajor, I'm sure, emphasized memo, memo, memo. I told my students when I was teaching qual methods, every time you touch your data, you should have a memo about that particular moment, even if it was something simple about what you did, but also focus on how you feel. If you are looking at 10 pages of an interview transcript and you're reading it over and over again, kind of in whole, you're going to get a very different relationship with that than you would if you're staring at the screen and you only kind of go through it really one time, you switch over to something else, and it's a very different feeling. One, you're very focused on the linear transcript. The other one, it's a little bit more messy. There's more distractions. You're probably going back and forth a lot more. Neither's right or wrong, but when you work by hand, you're keeping your data very close to you. And some of the qualitative researchers that I kind of respect the most chose to do everything by hand, in part because they did not like the feel of the distance that the computer gave them with their data. And some of them worked on very large projects. Some people choose to use minimal computer support. Things like using Word docs, Excel sheets, using Google Forms or Microsoft Forms or Access. I don't know if anybody had an opportunity ever to use, or reason, I guess, ever to use Microsoft Access, but it helps to build a little bit of a database. Maybe some of you in admin roles might have used it, but it can also be used for qualitative data analysis. And these are things that you probably have access to already that don't cost anything and you already know how to use fairly well. As Dr. Doyle had mentioned, when you're doing kind of a search in Nvivo, you can look for particular words or phrases and you can call them up to the front, and they don't necessarily have to be, like, for example, I think you use boring. If you type that word into Nvivo, you can decide whether you want it to say exactly boring or whether you want that to include all the root words and all the, all the changes. So bring up boring and bored and boredom and all those other words that are kind of around it. You can even break that out even more to have Nvivo look at kind of the sense of bored, right? So maybe it actually could pull up things like tired or uninterested or things like this too. You can actually do searches for some semantic properties. In Word, obviously, and in Google Docs, you can't necessarily get that nuanced with it. However, you could do a search for how many times a particular word or phrase is used, and that could be important to your data. Once you have your themes and your codes and your themes lined up, putting it into Excel so that you can kind of see and tabulate across is helpful. It's harder to do because you actually have to count that manually, but you can put it into Excel to, visualize it, right? So for example, if I was looking at all the times one of my students was labeled as shy, that was something I was interested in. And I did work with second language learners. And when students were kind of labeled as shy because they didn't speak up, I coded this as shy. So what I can do is look at all my teachers and pull up all the times that they called the student shy because of the way that they were interacting in the class. I could put that into Excel and help to visualize it. Kind of finally, the last level of kind of computer reliance is QDAS or QDA software programs. And again, they have a ton of features. However, you have to know them well, right? And that was already kind of mentioned, right? Is that if you don't know how to use it well, they kind of are rendered useless. There is actually no benefit of using a qualitative data analysis software over any of these other forms of analysis unless you learn to do it well. And that's a lot of upfront investment. So for those of you that are working on dissertations and are trying to get done in the next couple of months, you have to decide whether you want to spend a couple of weeks learning how to use the software well. Now, if you have the time and it's going to be a bigger payoff in the end, definitely use it. But a lot of what you can do, you could do just as well by hand or using minimal computer support through some of the software items that you already have available. The key concepts to emphasize here, and this is where it's really going to help you make the decision, is the organization and how you keep things organized, the visualization and how easy it is to visualize your data in different ways, and then collaboration. So if you're working on teams, it's obviously going to be much easier to use a shared file than it is going to be to pass around documents to each other. So these would be kind of the big three concepts that I would say should be kind of determining factors in whether or not you're going to use qualitative software programs. The organizational piece is going to go both on that front end of just keeping your documents in order, but it's also going to be how do you keep your codes organized? How do you keep your different analytical pieces organized? If you are looking at something like discourse analysis and you want to look at the linguistic concept of modality, so that's something like when somebody says, oh, I know it's going to rain tomorrow versus, oh, it might rain tomorrow. Those are two very different senses of kind of what's being said. And you can go through and code those modal terms, just like you can code anything else in Nvivo. That's going to be something that you can keep organized. You can have a category called modals, and then you can have broken out the different types of modals, and then you can code for those throughout your data set. When you go to visualize that, Reduce is usually used more so for, oh, can you not see my screen? New share. Thank you, Sandy, for speaking up. Can you see it now? Yeah. Somebody want, I can't really see your faces. So, okay, got it. Thanks. Okay. So, all right. So there's Atlas TI, Max QDA, and Nvivo Deduce are going to be the most common of these. QDA Minor is not so useful, partially because it's only on PC these days. Deduce is completely web-based and it's cheap, and that's why a lot of people would choose to use this. And by the way, there are many more out there. You just have to kind of figure out the one that's going to work for you. The three kind of big ones are over here, and these prices might have increased a little bit, but Atlas TI, Max QDA, and Nvivo are going to be the most common. As I mentioned, Nvivo is probably more seen in our field of literacy. Atlas TI is going to be seen in a lot of research consortiums, and of course, Max QDA kind of spans the gamut. Most of them are going to include the same type of documents that you can upload there. So there's nothing really different here. You're going to see a lot of like, you can upload PDFs, you can upload Word files, you can upload pictures, audio files, video files. Almost all of that can be uploaded into any of these softwares. So you can actually put in your raw data. You don't have to put in a transcript. You can actually put in an audio file in Nvivo. And you can actually code that audio file if you were interested in coding the audio file as opposed to the transcript. There's, again, benefits but to both. So just to kind of give a heads up, one of the problems with Nvivo, and this may have changed in the most recent version, but it can be buggy and crashes with some kind of larger projects. You probably won't necessarily see this in like a smaller dissertation project, but for example, in my dissertation, I was working in a lab where we had probably, we had 4 or 5 different researchers. All of us had massive data sets, and when we tried to get going, like it was very buggy, and at one point we lost 9 months of coding because the computer crashed, and none of us made a backup. So back up your projects, please. Back it up every day. But we lost 9 months of work because no data was lost, but we lost that. Again, these days, a lot of stuff can be stored on a network online, where you can also store it locally on your computer. One of the benefits that I like is the teamwork aspect. Most of the time, what you can do with Nvivo and with any of these things is actually share the project and have somebody do something. So if you're doing intercoder reliability, it's really easy for you to say, hey, can you code these 2 interviews to make sure that my coding is on track? And you can pull up the intercoder reliability scores really easily. That's really good for verification of your method, right? So something that would be much harder to do in person, you can now actually get like a number that goes along with how close your coding was matched other coders. All right, so again, going through this, most of this stuff isn't going to make sense until we get in there and start looking at the actual platform. But just so you know, these things are going to look fairly similar. You can see across the board, right? So there's no necessarily benefit of picking Nvivo just because your instructor said, oh, pick Nvivo. The only benefit there is that I can try to help you figure it out if there's a problem with Nvivo, right? I have no idea how to use Atlas TI, but I know that it's similar and I've seen other people use it. If you look at some of these other, I think it's this one, you can actually see that the face itself, this is Nvivo, this is what the older version, I'm sure Adele, yours looked pretty much like this. This is kind of what this setup looks like, and I'm going to show you that in a few minutes here, but this is what the setup looks like in Nvivo. If you go to Max QDA, it's almost identical. Like, it's not that much different. The buttons are in different places, the setup's slightly different, but the feel and the style is going to be very similar. QDA minor, again, fairly similar. If you look at Atlas TI, this is again a very similar interface. The interfaces are going to roughly be the same across any of these versions. Deduce, I actually have not used very much at all, and this one is the one that looks kind of the most dissimilar. But again, you still get this kind of feel for what the actual project looks like inside on the screen of your computer. And I'm going to walk you through that in a minute here to show you kind of where things are, so that as you get started playing around with it this week, we can, you can already have some familiarity with it. So let me see if there's anything else. Okay, so those were the big things that I wanted to mention about the kind of QDA software, what's out there, how to use it. I want to take an opportunity to answer any questions that you might have first before I jump into actually showing you what Nvivo looks like and how you can start to upload things, so that next week we can actually have more of a workshop of piecing things together and we can try some things out and use some of those features. So before I switch over to actually looking at the platform, any questions? These are bigger picture questions at this point, right? Or any concerns? Any noticings or excitements?
I'm looking forward to practicing it. This is all new to me, so
very good.
Thanks so much for all of the links. I've been sitting here saving all the links.
Good, yeah, and again, part of it is if you haven't used it before, just being able to sit down with it. It takes some time to click on those links, play around with it. YouTube's a great place. I know Dr. Bajor gave some YouTube links to just see what does this thing even do, right? Without actually seeing it kind of in practice, it's really hard to envision how it could be applicable to your study. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for the links. I'm going to sit down and then watch the videos so that I can get some ideas about that, because I'm so confused about using Nvivo. But I appreciate that I have a very nice mentor, Dr. Cho. She gave me a chances to learn, and then she gave me this software so I can practice again and again and again before I do my dissertation, you know. So I appreciate that I have a very, very good mentor, you know, but I don't know how to do that. And what I hope that is that somebody can sit beside me and tell me, okay, you need to click this one and do this one and something like that, you know.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, I'm really glad that you're getting that opportunity to kind of see it in action before you throw in your whole dissertation on there and have to do it. The difficult thing, the thing that I found most difficult with using this is that it does not alleviate the burden of doing qualitative research, which is going to be hard. So you mentioned a few minutes ago about, maybe I should change the name of the code. There's two decisions you have to make in qualitative data analysis software. The first one is the analytical decision of whether you need to change the name of the code, or whether you need to combine the codes, or whether you need to separate the codes, right? That piecing and tearing apart and all of that, that's the first question that you're going to have to address. Every qualitative researcher anywhere is going to have to address that question. The second one is the technical skills. And that's secondary because that's something you can learn